who was known to really dislike his own name tremendously, but he became such an amazing composer that years later we will never forget his name. Well, today I want to tell you about a French composer by the name of Jules Massenet. Jules Massenet was born in France in 1842. He was the youngest of 12 children in a middle-class, cultured family. Now, his father was an ironworks engineer, and so he brought an income, and it was fine. Now, the true culture, the true music came from his mother. His mother was a pianist, and she quickly saw that this youngest child of hers had a lot of talent. So she started teaching him, and he continued to learn. And so by the time he was 11, the family moved to Paris because he entered the conservatory there. But he did not come off as like this child prodigy that was like flashy, like Liszt, right? He was very disciplined. He was sensitive, but had like this super strong work ethic. And that's what he's going to have, always. Shortly after this move to Paris, his father's business fails, and so there's a lack of income, and they fall on hardships. He does not leave the conservatory. What he does is he starts playing percussion for local performances and makes money that way. He also starts teaching piano. Doing all this, though, it did not distract him from what he was there for, and he was doing great. He was taught by some of the best people, and he quickly distinguished himself as one of those hardworking, serious students. And yes, serious, but his work was not like boring and serious, right? His music was beautiful. It was so beautiful, in fact, that he won the Prix de Rome. Now, we've talked about this before, about other composers who won the Prix de Rome, but what does that actually mean? So this is the top composition prize for French composers, but you are going to Rome. Now, first of all, they let you live there in a villa for a year for free. So if you are financially hard up, like he was, having a place to live for a year, not having to worry about a roof over your head, it gives you such a tremendous freedom to really focus on your composition. But also you're taken out of this French music establishment, and now you're all of a sudden in Italy, and so you can study their music, and that we see over and over again has such an influence on these people that end up winning and going there. Also, because it's the number one, it's such a prestige thing. It opens up doors. You have connections, one, with all the other people that have won before you, but just in general, if there are 5 people up for the same job, but this one has the Prix de Rome, he's probably gonna get it. It was very needed for him, and it came at a really good time, so off to Rome he went. While in Rome, he meets none other than Franz Liszt. He's living there a bit retired in Italy, and Franz Liszt hears his music and is very impressed and very supportive. And also, he introduces him to several people, and one of these people was Louise Constance. And they fall in love and they get married. Now, they are married for their whole life. It is mostly a good marriage. Apparently, Massenet liked to flirt with other women. That wasn't very good, but she was always supportive of him and helped him, and it gave him a stable life. He goes back to Paris, and in the 1870s and 1880s, his career takes off, and he becomes the most prolific composer of operas in France. He is the French opera king. He ended up writing over 30 operas, and they're lovely and beautiful. And some of the things you've heard, you probably don't even realize that they're part of an opera, like the Meditation in Thai. His first opera that he writes was Manon, and then he writes Werther, and then Thai, and Le Cid, but there's a lot of them. They were very well received at the time, so moneymakers, and this is good, right? They were known because the music was beautiful and lyrical, and it had a lot of depth, but also the stories themselves. They had this psychological sensitivity that was kind of a new thing. It wasn't just all bravado. These characters had a lot of depth, and some of it was quite nuanced. Very unlike like Wagner, who had this monumental scale grand thing, which he loved, and that it has its place. But for Massenet, it was more intimate, emotional drama. He was known for his work ethic. He did not believe that you just sit around until inspiration strikes you and you grab it. He was very methodical. He had a time he got up, he had a time he had breakfast, and he had a time that he composed. And this was his work block. And he would sit down and he would compose. And apparently he never suffered from writer's block. He always had something to compose. He was very meticulous, very clear and clean lines. And there was always music there. But he wasn't... It was almost like mathematical about it, the way he went about it. But his music doesn't sound mathematical. It was just he didn't believe in this divine inspiration of music. It was just he could feel it. It was his job. I can only imagine what it's like being a composer in France at this time. You know, his colleagues were people like Georges Bizet, like Gabriel Fauré, Camille Saint-Saëns, like these amazing, phenomenal composers. 1878, he receives one of the most influential positions in Europe, and he becomes a teacher of composition at the Conservatory in Paris. He was known, of course, for the technical ability that he could teach. That's why he was hired. But he really encouraged individuality. He didn't want everyone to sound the same. Everyone had their own story to tell. He emphasized theatrical instinct. If you think this is where the story has to go, then take it there. He also wanted to make sure that they were ready for the profession. There are deadlines to be had. And there are ways to play with this in politics, like who do you talk to? How do you talk? He was making sure when they were done with his classes, they were ready for the world. What is kind of interesting is someone that was so meticulous and so careful and so aware of everything is the fact that he was known to really dislike his name. He thought that his name sounded harsh or not elegant enough. Which is interesting because Massenet sounds fine to me. For a composer so associated with musical beauty and refinement, this small personal insecurity offers this humanizing glimpse of who he was. He loved literature, he read a lot, and many of his operas are based on books, right? Manon, Werther, Thais, these are all based on books. He was also very inspired by the human voice. He had an incredible sensitivity to the human voice, and he would listen and make sure that his lines and the breathing of the lines would go along with the natural way that we would speak anyway. This helped singers, right? By the early 1900s, musical tastes start shifting. We get new composers coming in like Debussy, and they really changed the music as it was. He enjoyed it. He appreciated it. It was like he was not against change, but he knew himself and he stuck to what he did. And he continued to be a respected composer. In 1912, at the age of 70, he passed away from stomach cancer. He really worked until very shortly before his death. It was just what he did. Massenet never had this revolutionary spotlight on him. He was not a Wagner. He was not a Debussy. He was not a Beethoven. He's not someone that we're like, oh my goodness. But his music is beautiful and prolific, and it is still often performed. You're not going to find opera singers that do not know his works. He was disciplined, yet deeply expressive, prolific, and yet refined. And through his operas and students, his voice continues to sing on the world stage. Go and listen to something by Jules Massenet.